Today on Exploring Nevada, we head to Carson City, the state capital, home to several vintage steam engines of the famous Virginia and Truckee Railroad. In the late 1800s, the V&T hauled wood to the mines of Virginia City and hauled back ore, rich in silver and gold. Today, these old engines still ply the steel rails, but now at the Nevada State Railroad Museum. We'll be speaking with several railroad experts on the back platform of one old rail car, just like the whistle stops of old. First, with Railroad Museum Director John Ballweber. And John, here we are standing on one of these old cars, but this is not all that's here at the museum. It's quite a complex. What do you have going on here?
Well, it's a 13-acre site here in Carson City, and the Railroad Museum consists of several buildings, as well as about a mile of railroad track, a historic train station, which we've restored and we use every time the trains are running, a water tower where we put water in the steam locomotives and people can see how that's done, parking, easy access in and out, good entrance off the highway, RV parking, and quite a bit happening. A nice park space, people come in and picnic and have activities in the park space, so there's really quite a lot to see here.
Okay, and so if you come here at certain times of the year, you could be on a moving car or on a train?
That's right. During the summer months, May through September, we operate historic railroad equipment on the weekends. For the most part, we operate the motor car, which we're standing on today, and it goes out on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. It's a really interesting piece of equipment. About 7 weekends out of the year, we operate a steam train. And the steam train is really interesting. A lot of folks have never seen a steam engine operate and have never ridden behind one, and we offer that here at the museum on our 1-mile loop of track. So typically, if you come on major holidays, the Memorial Day, the 4th of July, the Labor Day, that sort of thing.
You've got Santa train, I know.
We've got
Christmas.
a big steam train event in December with Santa Claus, and so that's really your best bet to catch the steam trains operating.
It must be a real fun thing for the kids and adults to ride the train.
It's really fun. Everyone just loves it, and there doesn't seem to be, age doesn't matter. Age does not matter. The smallest to the most seasoned, everyone loves those trains. And
so people love them regardless of whether they're returning to their childhood or if maybe they're bringing along their grandchildren and the kids are having a first visit.
Oh, absolutely. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen Grandpa with grandchild explaining, I worked on trains just like this, and this is what Grandpa did, and this is how we used to get around, and the kids really do get something out of it. It's a good experience.
Some of the engines that you've got here are just beautiful. They're beautifully restored, and maybe they don't go out because they're so beautiful. What are some of the most popular ones?
Well, some of the things you really need to see when you come to the museum are the restored locomotives. They are spectacular pieces of equipment, and perhaps the most famous one of those locomotives is the Inyo. It was operated on the Virginia and Truckee Railroad for many years. Went off in the 1930s and sort of had a movie career, and eventually ended up here, back in Carson City, as part of the collection here at the museum. The Railroad Museum restored the locomotive to its appearance and operating condition of 1889, so it still burns wood for fuel. It looks really spectacular, and it operates on probably once or twice a year, typically over the 4th of July weekend. We also traveled the locomotive. It represented the museum and the state of Nevada at the World's Fair in 1986 in Vancouver, British Columbia. And we also took the locomotive to Sacramento for the California State Railroad Museum celebration in 1991. So a lot of people in the area are familiar with the locomotive and have seen it, but it's a unique piece because it does operate, and you really need to see that when you come to the museum.
And John, you also have a transportation fair often, perhaps not every year, but often, and a symposium.
Right. We do a transportation fair usually over the 4th of July weekend about every 3 years. Because it's such a huge event, it takes so much time and resources to put it on, and we just can't do it every year. But when we do those, we bring visiting locomotives in a variety of activities. We do annually a railroad history symposium in October. It's a really good program. It's the largest program of its kind anywhere in the country. It's a 3-day symposium. We have speakers from all over the country who come and present papers on railroad history in Nevada. And it's a very, very good program. And obviously the information is available through the museum.
And the public is welcome at all of these things?
Absolutely.
And just one quick mention, we'll be speaking with a volunteer later, but I assume that this museum could not run without volunteer help.
That's correct. The volunteers are the backbone of the museum. We have over 100 active volunteers who support the museum through over 14,000 hours of service every year. So it's what you see at the museum wouldn't be possible without our volunteers. They are outstanding.
Thank you, John. It's a terrific facility. It's located in Carson City. There are many historic attractions right around here, so it's a place you can easily spend a weekend. And coming up, we discover the romantic history of these relics of America's railroading past through the eyes of education curator Dan Thielen.
Gather around. Now everyone, this is an exhibit of an Ice Age mammal. Now long ago in Nevada, these ancient elephants rummaged through springs and stream beds for food.
Imagine at one time, herds of these huge animals roamed in what might have been your own backyard. You'd be amazed.
Dan Thielen is the curator of education for the Nevada State Railroad Museum in Carson City. Dan, all these things are pretty impressive here. It's quite a complex with various engines and rolling stock. This particular car here, what's the significance of it?
This particular car is a motor car. The 401 ran down in Arizona for a number of years. It's got almost 3/4 miles on it. For a little bit of time, it ran up in the Virginia and Truckee Railroad up in Virginia City. What makes it significant for us is that it is a motor car. It's old, it has a nice feel to it, the patina on it, but we can pop into this motor car, we can turn the ignition on, and we can go for a ride. It allows us to do something that we can't do with the steam engine. I don't know if you're familiar with the steam engine, but before you ever get on a locomotive, there's 4 hours of work that go in. The guys are up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, slowly warming it up and getting it up to steam. It takes a lot of work to do it, and every time you do it, it takes a little bit of life out of the locomotive. And so we want to be really careful with those things. With this motor car, it's got an engine just like your pickup truck. You just turn the key, and we're off and running. We use it very frequently with students. They'll come down to the museum, they'll have a tour, and we can pack 30 kids into this and go for a ride around the museum on the property.
What's the experience like for the school kids that might be different than if they got into a railroad car that was created in Hollywood yesterday, let's say?
You know, you can go up and you can ride the Amtrak train, and they try to make sure that it's air conditioned and you don't smell what's going on outside, you know, as you change through trees and things like that, and it's quiet, and you have a very sanitary experience. 100 years ago, it's shake, rattle, and roll. You bang around on the tracks. It's pretty, if you want to be cool, you open a window. If you want to be warm, you start a fire. It's so primitive that if you wanted to go to the bathroom, you'd end up looking straight through the ground onto the tracks. And it's kind of a cool thing for kids. They just don't think of things that way. And it reminds us how it used to be.
So is it a fun thing for the kids?
They love it. Sometimes you get a kid on here and he'll ride the motor car all day long and can't get him off it.
I bet some of the adults are like that.
You know, they are. Our volunteers end up loving to come down here. We run it all summer long, every weekend, 3 days when we're not running steam trains. And we'll run it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I'm convinced they'd be here even if the public never showed up.
So some of the details probably on the car are real different than you'd find today too.
Absolutely. There's no seatbelts. There's no airbag in it. It's pretty simplistic. We wanted to move people from point A to point B and charge them X amount of dollars, and that's what it did. It's a neat ride, though.
Well, some of the other pieces that you have here, I mean, I know you have to make decisions about what you're going to restore and what you aren't. Tell us about one of the other signature pieces, let's say, that's in this collection.
Right now, we're working on the McKean motor car. It has national significance, probably world significance. They built about 200 of those motor cars in Omaha, Nebraska. What makes it significant is that this will be the only one left, and it is the most it is the most complete car already, even in the middle of its restoration. It is the most beautiful example of this. And McKean did some phenomenal things with wind splitting technology, which we now know as you know, trying to increase the economy of your cars by making them streamlined. It's got an Art Deco feel. It doesn't look like it belongs on a railroad. It is just a neat piece from the pointy end to the round end. It's a neat motor car. Has particular romance to it because it lived in Carson City from its birth to when it came back to the museum. It banged around in Carson City as a diner, and Al's Plumbing finally used it up as his offices and then donated it to the state of Nevada to restore for the people of Nevada.
Besides all these wonderful pieces that you have here, you also do special exhibits in your museum, and you have one coming up now on the Chinese in America, is that right?
We do. We are working on an exhibit right now called Chinese and the American Railroad. And it highlights the impact that the Chinese had on America. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but when they built the Transcontinental in the 1860s, we were a nation at war. And most of the labor were involved in that war. I mean, it takes a lot of people to do that. And when the Central Pacific started building from the west to the east, there was a shortage of labor. There was nobody who would do that work. There's plenty of money to be made in the mines and plenty of work to be done, you know, with the Army. And so they started recruiting people out of China and hired thousands of them. Without them, the railroad couldn't have been built. But they brought their own language, they brought their own culture, they brought their own society with them, and then made their money and left. But the threads of that society are still here in Nevada, and you can still find it out in the wilderness, you can still find it in the way we think and what we do. Every major city in Nevada has a Chinatown, and it's kind of neat. It kind of adds to the fabric and the flavor of what Nevada is and who we are.
Well, in your exhibit, you'll have photographs, and what other components will be there?
You know, Nevada has been fortunate that a huge amount of very significant artifacts had been collected early, and they still remain with Nevada. We've been approached on some of these by the Smithsonian. We've had some exhibited in Baltimore, and because of the significance and their rarity, it caused quite a stir. And so we've decided that if it's causing that much for people outside of Nevada, my goodness, we need to tell this story to the people who own these artifacts, and that's what we're doing. The exhibit will be on display for a couple of years, several years. We're semi-permanent, and we're going to show we have a temple that's built in there, and we have some artifacts that belong inside there, and it is an exciting chance to see what Nevada was like.
Now, you'll also have some lectures and other things in connection with it?
Yes, we certainly will. We have several noted authors and experts on the Chinese history in America that are going to come to the museum and briefly speak about their most recent findings. It's an exciting time to be in the museum.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, what we will do is put the website and phone number on so you can contact Dan if you want to know any specific dates. And coming up, we find out more about the McKean motor car and of the love and respect that is producing its remarkable restoration.
Cleared and he
realized there was a rider and a saddle on his back, and he exploded. Only in Nevada.
These days, you'll find the restoration crew at the Nevada State Railroad Museum working away on the vintage McKean motor car. Overseeing this remarkable restoration is Chris DeWitt, who interrupted his work to climb up on the back platform of the motor car and talk about the art of making the old new again. Chris, this is a beautiful piece. Dan was telling us about this car. You were involved in restoring this.
That's correct, yes.
And now, most of the time, you're in the restoration shop and you're not able to rest on your laurels because you're working on another car.
That's correct.
The McKean motor car. What's the significance of that piece?
That car was purchased by the Virginia and Truckee Railroad new from the manufacturer. It was delivered here, and it has never left here. So it's strictly a northern Nevada piece. It's also the sole surviving example, as far as we know, of a car of this nature. We have reports that there are bits and pieces of them scattered around, and we haven't really been able to substantiate that.
Now, it has quite an interesting history, actually, of where you found it and getting it here.
Yeah, it was only half a mile away from here. In 1959 or 1960, Al Bernhardt's father purchased it and moved it to where it sat until just a few years ago.
It was inside a
Yeah, it was
plumbing business.
I'm not sure that it was inside originally, but it, through evolution, ended up inside as they added onto the building over the years and expanded their property.
And how did somebody know that it was there and that you could get it out of that building?
Rail fans are insidious, and they ferret information like this out, and it was known commonly that it was there. But if you were driving by, you could see the characteristic portholes in the side of the car on the side of the building for a short distance, and that would be a dead giveaway.
So you just kind of went over there one day and took the roof off of the building and pulled it out?
Actually, we'd been pestering Al Bernhardt for a number of years to acquire that car. With the growth of Carson City, it was pretty obvious that that site, something was going to happen to it. The building wasn't in particularly good condition, and it wasn't built to code, and we knew it was going to come down someday. So we just stayed after him, and he did graciously give us the car when he decided to develop the property.
So you kind of plucked it out of there, and you have it down here now. What's the biggest challenge about restoring this piece?
Doing it faithfully, being accurate in the work. Whatever we do to this car now will be engraved in stone for the rest of its life. So if we make an error, it will be that way forever. So the hardest part is to be faithful to the original design, construction, and appearance.
And how do you know how to be faithful to it?
Through research, looking at photographs, looking at drawings that we have received from museums that were used to build that car, literature, and then the physical research of the car itself, looking at what's there, and looking at evidence of changes that were made and finding original parts on it. And one of the redeeming features is that no one that remembers that car well is alive today, so there's no one out there to call us a liar.
So if there is a mistake made, we may not know about it.
You very well may not. Yeah,
And there's a number of you working on this restoration.
yeah, there are 4 of us in the shop and volunteers.
And that's pretty much what you focus on. Now, are some projects more fun than others to work on?
Oh, absolutely. After a piece is finished, then you get into the issue of maintaining it, and the maintenance can become tedious.
What about when a car is done, like this one that we're standing on here? It's all done. What is the response that you hope to get from people about it? What is it that gives you a sense that you've done your job right?
You know, when casual visitors who aren't involved in the history of the car, aren't particularly fans, they're just visitors to the museum, when they go, wow, this is really neat, that's the response that we want. We want to reach out to those people that aren't rail fans, aren't historians, and aren't in the field itself. And so when the kids say, boy, I really had a good time and I love that car, that does it all.
So when you see those school kids that Dan was talking about taking a ride, and it's hard to get them out of the car, hard to get them to go back to their regular lives.
That makes it all worthwhile. That does the whole thing.
Great. Congratulations on all this fine work, and we're
Thanks.
looking forward to the McKean motor car being finished. And in fact, how long do you think it will take to get done?
I'd like to believe that we could finish it in a year. And finished means about 90% done, because restoration projects are never really quite done. So that's, I think, a reasonable goal given our other responsibilities. I think a year is reasonable.
Okay, so by 2003 maybe, that
Yeah.
car will be done and riding around on these tracks?
I hope so. Yeah, that's our goal.
Great. We're looking forward to it. Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome.
And coming up next, a talk with one of the volunteers who makes this whole place possible. We've heard from everybody how this place would not be able to run without the help of volunteers. And now I'm speaking with Russ Tanner, who is one of the many volunteers here. Russ, you've been here about 3 years, you said?
About 3 years.
Okay, what causes you to be here spending all your time volunteering instead of being out playing golf or cruising around or doing one of those things that you always hear about when people retire?
Well, you know, it's just as much fun as playing golf or cruising around. I interact with a lot of people, and trains have been something that have attracted me since I was a kid.
Well, you are one of nearly 100 volunteers, I
That's
understand, who keep this place going. What is it that the volunteers do here?
Volunteers do all sorts of things. We do things like being at the front desk, collecting the money from the people who come in, operating the store, operating trains. The car that we're standing on here is a car that gets used for school tours, gets used on weekends, and volunteers do all the operation from being the conductor to being the motorman on a car like this, and running the steam trains, everything from being the engineer, fireman, conductor, car attendants, doing all those fun things as well.
Now, what is the most fun for you?
For me, I think the most fun is doing school tours, because I get to interact with the kids and bring them some of the idea of what I like about trains and history.
When the kids are here, what is it that you're hoping happens to them? What kind of transformation do you hope takes place?
Well, I hope they'll get the same enthusiasm that I get. See the things that are fun. Learn about the way that the artifacts relate to people.
Does volunteering around the trains take you back in time to your childhood?
Well, when I was a kid, I can remember riding trains. I lived back east, and we used to go from Maine down to New Jersey on the train. And those are pleasant memories, but my real interest in the trains developed when I was a teenager, when I started doing modeling.
What is the experience like of being around on an old train compared to a modern train?
Well, the old-timey trains, like the ones that we have here, there's a lot of motion to them. They're big, powerful things, but you see all the action, the wheels going around, the rods moving back and forth. And the more modern trains, the wheels go around. There's the power and there's the energy there, but it's still not quite the same as the flash and all of the excitement of the steam locomotive.
And for some of the other volunteers, what do you think it is that really hooks them about this place?
Well, a lot of us are interested in trains, and it's the sort of thing that it's hard to really understand where that comes from. But the other volunteers, many of them really are train fans. We do other things. We do visiting other railroads and going to museums like that. But there are a lot of our volunteers here who I've talked to, and they've said, well, you know, I've never been interested in trains, but I like being with the people. And that's one of the things about our volunteer crew here, is that they are all really wonderful people.
And so they have a sense that they're contributing to something.
Certainly. They contribute to not only to our society and helping people learn about our history, but they contribute in all sorts of little subtle ways. And many of our volunteers do things that nobody ever sees. The people who work doing filing in the archives, or work in the back office by the store, getting the inventory in, getting things up on the shelves. And nobody ever sees that happen, but they are there, and they're just as important as those who are out talking to the public.
Well, I want to thank you on behalf of all of your volunteers, all the volunteers that are here, for keeping this place running, because I know that it couldn't exist without this. We just wouldn't have we wouldn't be able to afford the staff to be able to run this. And I want to know, too, if you need other volunteers. Are you looking, or do you have plenty of people?
We can always use more volunteers. People are needed who have all sorts of talents. The people who work in the restoration shop can always use somebody with some woodworking or metalworking skills. And just people who are willing to come in and spend a little bit of time and learn a little bit so they can pass on their heritage to other people.
Well, thank you. And if you are interested in volunteering here, we'll put up the website, put up a phone number, and you heard it from Russ. You have a lot of fun here. This place is well worth visiting. It's in Carson City, lots of other historic places around, so please come visit the Nevada State Railroad Museum.
Come play with trains.
He gets to ride for free today because it is Mother's Day.
Wow, oh my God.
So for the 4 of you, that's going to be a whole $1. That's sort of the 1930 prices, I think.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of Exploring Nevada on television. But if you'd like to ride these rails and explore Nevada's rich railroad heritage for yourself, come visit the Nevada State Railroad Museum in Carson City. Besides taking a train ride, visitors can see a wide collection of historic rolling stock from the V&T and other Nevada railroads. The museum also offers a regular lecture series and special events. The museum is located on Highway 395, a mile south of the state capitol. For more information, call 775-687-6953 or visit them on the web at nevadaculture.org. For accommodations and other special attractions in the state capital region, check out travelnevada.net. Besides the Nevada State Railroad Museum, the Nevada Division of Museums and History operates 6 other museums around the state, including the State Museum in Carson City, East Ely Depot Museum in Ely, Lost City Museum at Lake Mead, the State Museum and Historical Society in Las Vegas, the Historical Society in Reno, and under construction, an historic tourist railroad in Boulder City. See you next time on Exploring Nevada.
Come on, up the hill.
Lo que estamos diciendo aquí es que el problema del literacy, como estamos hablándolo, no es solo leer y escribir, pero cómo se hace la matemática, cómo usted lee unas instrucciones. Es importante que usted aprenda esto y hay muchos programas en el estado que le pueden ayudar. Este número de 1-800 le puede ayudar para que usted sepa dónde conseguir los programas que le van a ayudar a mejorar su vida.